Hi, I'm Matt, and today we're going to be talking about DMing for new or nervous players and bringing them out of their shell, whether that be in social encounters, combat encounters, or anything in between. First things first, let's talk about when a player does something right. Let's say that you've got an obstacle set up, and the player figures out a solution. Now, the big thing here is that if they found out a solution, then congratulate them for it. Give them some positive affirmation, some positive reinforcement. If they're a new player and they're nervous about extending forth any idea, then giving them just a little pat on the back can make a big difference in making them feel more comfortable providing more ideas in the future. As an improv teacher, whenever I've coached or taught new players, I judge them on a different scale than players that have been doing it for years. And it makes sense, right? Because if you just barely started, then I wouldn't expect you to know everything that a player of 10, 15, 20 years experience would know. And the same is true for D&D. If someone is new to the table, then I'm not going to be judging an idea they have up in the same light as one of my players who's been playing since the very first edition, because that wouldn't be fair. The level of experience, the level of training and research that these two players have done is astronomically different. And to judge them by the same light is not fair. We talked about players doing something right, giving them a little positive reinforcement. Now let's talk about when players get something wrong. So, oftentimes, a new player will have a lot of anxiety about getting something wrong, whether it be the calculation for a skill check or the application of a spell. Now, if they happen to get something wrong, then, well, take care of it very quickly. Don't turn it into a lecture. Don't turn it into a moment where you're shaming the person. Simply correct it quickly and move on. Now, if you want a little extra credit, there is something you can do, especially if you have a group of new players, because this can really broaden their possibilities and make them feel a lot more inclined to do and try new things at the table. Now, as I said before, this is extra credit. If it's not for you, that's okay. But here's what you do. Say a player wants to try something creative, then you can take the extra step beyond telling them that it's impossible and tell them a way that they might be able to do it. Now, this will be on a case-by-case basis, so make sure that when you apply this, you remember your rulings so that if someone else wants to try something like that too, you'll be fair and just. For example, called shots are not a thing in D&D 5e. There are some variant rules, there are some house rules, some homebrewed rules for this, but as it stands in the standard player's handbook, you can't do it. However, if you have a new player who suddenly gets really excited about attempting something, like let's say they're a rogue and they want to take a specific stab to blind this enemy. Well, if they want to, then you can, on the spot, make it more difficult so they can decide if they still want to try it. Now, depending on what they're trying to accomplish, if their goal would potentially steal someone else's spotlight, maybe someone's ability or class feature, then the difficulty ramps up even more. But once you express that, then you can ask them if they still want to try this. For instance, let's say that player wants to try to blind the enemy with a slash. Now, I'm not gonna allow this expert swashbuckler, who will most of the time hit with a slash, to completely nullify what would be a second level spell. So, instead, if they have this idea, I might have them make the attack at disadvantage. Or it might be a case where I raise the AC. If I do either of these things, I will express this to the player before they make the decision to do it, just so they know what they're getting into. Additionally, I might have the enemy make a saving throw. And this saving throw, because this is a difficult task, this saving throw isn't going to be particularly difficult for the enemy. Now, let's say the dice go the player's way. In this case, it's not going to be the same as someone using a spell slot to blind the enemy. I might make it, depending on the dice roll. If they rolled decently and were able to hit, then maybe it'll be sort of like the blinded condition for the next attack. So maybe someone will get advantage on them. Or maybe it'll be the blinded condition for the enemy's next attack, so that when they try to take a swing, they'll have disadvantage. Or if the rolls are going well enough for the player, and that's quite a few rolls, that's potentially a roll at disadvantage with an enemy's higher AC, with also a relatively easy saving throw for the enemy. That's a lot of rolls that they need to make. If they pull that off perfectly, I might be willing to give this blinded condition maybe for a round. Again, the main thing here is that I'm finding a way to say yes without making it feel like I'm a pushover, like I'm willing to let someone's creativity override someone else's special class features or abilities. But the big thing here, of course, when I'm making these calls in the moment, it does take a little extra effort. So, depending on your table's needs and time constraints, it might not be for you. It's just something that I've done to help my newer players inspire their creativity. And I think as far as they're concerned, it's been able to help them come out of their shells. Just make sure that when you are applying these moment-to-moment decisions, that you are able to express the difficulty to your players before they make the choice, so that they can make a relatively informed decision. In another case, I had a player who wanted to attempt to vault over an enemy to position himself in between the enemy and one of his allies. Now, mechanically speaking, if we were just looking at his movement on the board, then all he's doing is revolving around the enemy to get in between. There'd be no attack of opportunity. He'd simply be in between the enemy and the ally. The ally isn't moving anywhere. There was a square in between those two. So, at face value, it seems like a fairly mundane movement. However, what this player was proposing, because they were a gunslinger and they have that ever limited resource of grit that requires them to do daring deeds to earn it back, they asked for the opportunity to vault over the enemy into that spot to earn a grit. And because of that difference, like I said before, at face value, the positioning is the same, but because they wanted that limited resource, I made a judgment call. And I said, okay, if you want to try to do this, there is going to be a risk for that reward. And the risk will be an acrobatics check, contested by this enemy's dexterity saving throw, to see if they're able to move quickly enough as you're trying to vault over them, to move quickly enough so that your balance is altered. And if they fail the acrobatics check against that saving throw, then instead of landing in between, they would fall prone next to the enemy, which, as we all know, prone would give that enemy advantage on their swings. So we just talked about providing new players positive feedback when it comes to their successful creative ideas, not judging them too harshly based on your own experiences as a DM, not judging them based on other players' creativity, and also a little bit of extra credit as far as creativity, as far as adjudicating on the spot if someone has an idea that doesn't necessarily fall within the rules as written. So, I hope this was helpful for you. If you like this, please like it. If you think I'm dead wrong and shouldn't do any of that on the spot, please leave a comment. I would love to have a little discussion with y'all. If you have any questions or anything, please let me know and I will answer them as quickly as I can. If you want more content like this, please subscribe. And until next time, take care.